I hear you've signed up to GM a session of the G.I. Joe role-playing game for your friends. Then let me be the first to say, Yo Joe! The Essence 20 role-playing system games like the G.I. Joe role-playing game are collaborative storytelling games. Game masters are the cross point of the imaginations at the table, the rules in the book, and the world of G.I. Joe. If you didn't realize everything you were signing up for, now you know. We'll be covering the basics of your role as the game master, setting a scene, telling a story, playing in the world of G.I. Joe, and using the rules.
Everything your players know about their characters is based on how they interact with the world. Their movement tells them how far they can go, their skills tell them what they're good at, etc. But without you telling them about the world they're in, it's just stats and ideas. More than anything, as the game master, you'll be telling your players what their characters perceive. At the start of every scene, tell them where they are, describe the textures around them, the colors, the sounds, the smells. Keep in mind where they're coming from and focus on the obvious attention grabbers, but allow them to ask questions before pressing play on the action. If a PC's wearing a jump jetpack, expect them to want to know how high the ceiling is, if there are balconies they can land on. If they found a key at any point during the mission, expect them to ask about every lock in every room. The more you game with the same players and characters, the better you'll understand the information they need and want, and the better you'll be able to personalize your descriptions. Setting a scene covers who, what, when, and where, but broader storytelling covers why. When you run a mission where it's a published adventure, an original adventure you've written out in detail, or a story you're largely improvising as you go, you need to understand what Cobra's up to and why the PCs should care. Most missions begin with a briefing, which basically tells the players what to expect in the last scenes. Major Blood was spotted in the location of an upcoming United Nations conference, for example. You would need to know where Major Blood is and what his plans are. You also need to know what the player characters need to do to find out. How you tell the story is up to you. You could have Duke straight up tell the PCs that Major Blood is known to partake in the local poetry scene, and send them directly to the artist district. You could give the PCs Major Blood's dossier, which includes clues for them to decipher with performance and culture skill tests. The latter makes them feel like they've earned that information, but risks derailing the adventure if they miss important clues. How much room you allow for player input is up to you, but it's important to remember that this is their story too. If you have prepared for the PCs to zig and they unanimously vote to zag, you have a decision to make. Some GMs make zagging a dead end and wait for the PCs to decide to try and zig. Others cross out zig on their notes and pretend it said zag all along. Some understand their world and story so well that they can improvise around an unexpected zag. Remember that your players are there for a good time. If you struggle with improv but run a fun game when you have the support of your notes, don't feel guilty if you railroad them a little to keep them on track. The elements you include and how you present them establish the tone of your story. If they must infiltrate a Cobra compound and put off discovery as long as possible, it's a stealth mission. If Cobra's established a foothold in a foreign country unfriendly to G.I. Joe, it's an intrigue mission. G.I. Joe has room for a variety of genres, from bunker busting, guns blazing, vehicle assault, pure military fantasy, to ghost sightings, genetic mutation, and giant robots of pulp science fiction. If you've ever seen an episode of G.I. Joe or read a G.I. Joe comic, you have the template for a G.I. Joe role-playing game session. A selection of Joes is going about their business, socializing, training, on duty around G.I. Joe HQ when duty calls. The Joes meet with superior officers to get a mission briefing, then deploy to investigate suspected Cobra activity. This leads them on a series of adventures as they gather intel, close ground, until finally they confront the Cobra operative in charge. G.I. Joe is the codename for an international, highly trained special mission force. Its purpose? To defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless criminal organization determined to rule the world. The G.I. Joe Role-Playing Game Core rulebook explains G.I. Joe's purpose, presents an active roster made up of over 80 characters from the 40+ years of the real American hero brand. It also details a dozen notable Cobra characters as well as 20 branches of the Cobra Corps. This, plus land, sea, and air vehicles for both sides, means you can live out the ultimate G.I. Joe adventure.
Your Game Master duties don't end at storytelling. You're also the final arbiter of the rules, knowing what skill tests to call for and when, and setting difficulties. Rolling a skill test means rolling a d20 and a skill die. The better a character is at a skill, the higher the skill die. You add the results of the rolls together to get the result of the skill test. The ideal time to call for a skill test is when a task isn't easy and there are consequences of failure. A 30-foot wall might seem like a challenge to climb, but if they have all the time in the world to set up a rope and go get a ladder, the skill test is inconsequential. But if they're running away from guards, getting over that wall is the difference between getting away and getting in a fight. Most of the skills in the G.I. Joe role-playing game are self-explanatory. You might need to remind yourself of the difference between brawn and might, but otherwise, the name of the skill tells you when it comes into play. It's good to have a skill in mind for a task at hand, but you should also be flexible and ask for player input. For example, the default skill for climbing is athletics, but acrobatics makes sense for a nimble character like Quick Kick. A case could even be made for Streetwise, the skill for getting by in an urban environment, even though Streetwise is a social skill. Chapter 6 of the G.I. Joe role-playing game, Essence Scores and Skills, includes a step-by-step guide to using skills, which includes how and when to modify rolls, and a chart of typical skill test difficulties. For example, you might call climbing that wall challenging, setting the difficulty of the skill test at 15, and you're willing to allow athletics and acrobatics skill tests to roll unmodified. But if a character wants to roll Streetwise, they suffer a snag. Combat works the same way. Attacks are skill tests that work much the same way, with a few extra steps to deal with more detailed consequences. In fact, because so much of the game comes down to skill tests, once you get used to their rules, you'll find the G.I. Joe role-playing game plays quickly and intuitively. Good luck out there, Game Master, and Yo Joe!